This is Group 1's presentation on the United Kingdom. Our members include myself, Omar, Sam, Joseph, and Ziyu. Our presentation will cover a wide range of topics compartmentalised into 5 parts consisting of the following: globalisation, economic development and human development, cultural distance, trade theories, and trade policies. Our purpose is to provide Australian firms considering expansion into the UK with key knowledge and analysis. The UK's population has just under 67 million, has a GDP of just over 3 trillion. Its top imports are cars, refined oil and crude oil, and top exports are cars, power generators, medical and pharmaceutical products. Question 1. Globalisation, a commonly used term that Howard McGrew, Goldblatt and Perrotin argue is the widening, deepening and speeding up of worldwide interconnectedness in all aspects of contemporary social life. That right there has been a defining force in shaping the political economy of the United Kingdom, with profound implications for its political, economic and legal systems. Understanding the crossover between these systems is essential in comprehending the impact of globalisation on the UK's political economy. Firstly, let's examine the political system. Globalisation has exerted significant pressure on the UK's political landscape, leading to shifts in policy priorities and government structures. The UK's membership in international organisations such as the European Union, prior to Brexit, and its participation in global trade agreements such as Australia and United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement are just some major results of globalisation. This has sometimes limited the autonomy of the UK government in shaping domestic policies and regulations. Additionally, globalisation has heightened political independence, as events and decisions in other parts of the world increasingly impact domestic policies. For instance, economic crises in distant countries can quickly reverberate through global markets, influencing voter sentiments and government responses. This particularly seen throughout the Ukraine and Russian war, with price increases resulting in government facing record low ratings. Moving on to the economic system, globalisation has profoundly transformed the UK's economic landscape. They are the 6th largest economy in the world, and 69% of their GDP is owing to international trade. The UK is the 2nd largest exporter and largest importer of commercial services. The liberalisation of trade and investment barriers has facilitated the integration of the UK economy into the global marketplace, enabling greater access to foreign markets and capital. Multinational corporations play a significant role in the economy, driving innovation, creating jobs, and contributing to economic growth. However, globalisation has also led to heightened competition, particularly from emerging economies with lower labour costs. This has prompted structural changes in the UK economy, with a shift away from traditional industries towards services and knowledge-based sectors. Now let's consider the legal system. The UK's legal framework is deeply entwined with its economic and political systems, providing the regulatory infrastructure necessary for conducting business and resolving disputes. Renowned academic Frank Leck notes that commercial law has become an intricate, autonomous legal order on a transnational scale, developed over many centuries by participants in a truly international community. In essence, Leckner attributes globalisation to much of the UK's law and policy foundation. Globalisation has posed both opportunities and challenges for the UK's legal system. On one hand, the harmonisation of international legal standards has facilitated cross-border transactions and investment, reducing barriers to entry for foreign firms. On the other hand, navigating the complexities of international law and regulatory compliance can present significant challenges, particularly for foreign companies seeking to establish a presence in the UK. For an Australian firm considering expansion into the UK market, there are many benefits, but also several challenges may arise. Some benefits include that both Australia and the United Kingdom's legal systems are based on common law, hence a large aspect of similarity. Common law being based on case law and precedent allows for a strong foundation facilitating international trade. A significant challenge is due to the UK leaving the EU. This will and has seen the British government make decisions based on protecting and supporting their local firms in specific sectors of the UK economy. Whilst issues may arise from these decisions by the British government, Australia and the UK Trade Talk Group has and will continue to hold consultations to ensure Australian firms can still develop and thrive in the United Kingdom. It is worth noting that the UK is facing high borrowing costs. Despite only being a short-term prediction, this may affect Australian firms' ability to borrow and make a significant presence in the UK. Furthermore, the UK's legal system is undergoing significant changes in response to evolving global challenges such as cybersecurity, data privacy, and environmental regulation, something Australian firms must stay abreast of. To conclude, globalisation has profoundly influenced the political economy of the United Kingdom, shaping its political, economic, and legal systems in complex ways. While globalisation has expanded economic opportunities and facilitated cross-border integration, it has also posed some challenges for the UK's legal system, particularly for foreign firms seeking to establish a presence in the country. By navigating these challenges effectively, and leveraging the opportunities presented by globalisation. Australian firms have the ability to position themselves for success in a dynamic UK market. We move on to question 2 for Omar.
Thank you, Jack. Now I'll be moving on to question 2, economic development and human development in the UK. First, we'll start off with GNI per capita. GNI measures the total annual income received by a resident of a nation, and it stands for gross national income. The UK has the 24th highest GNI per capita in the world. The UK's GNI per capita has generally increased from 41,660 in 2017 to 49,240 in 2022, except for a notable dip in 2020, likely to the economic impacts of COVID-19 pandemic, which was obviously not only in the UK but in the entire world. However, post-2020, there was a significant recovery and growth. As shown on the screen, in 2020, the GNI was 38,750, and in 2021, it jumped to 43,240. This indicates a resilient economy. Such economic resilience suggests a stable environment for business, investment, and operations. Moving on to the PPP, Purchasing Power Parity. Purchasing Power Parity adjusts GNI to account for difference in living costs relative to the United States. The measure produces a better sense of the real purchasing power of the income in the UK. This is a growth pattern. Obviously, we can see in 2015 it was 41,570. In 2022, it became 57,750. They have the 28th highest PPP per capita in the world. The sharp increase post-2020 again underscores the economic recovery and growth. The implications for market entry, as high PPP indicates that the UK population has more disposable income relative to the cost of living, making it an attractive market for high-value products and services, which could be crucial for firms selling premium goods or services. Moving on to the Human Development Index (HDI) by the United Nations. The Human Development Index is a composite index assessing 3 dimensions of human development: life expectancy, education, and income. To avoid repetition, I will only be discussing life expectancy and education, since income has already been discussed earlier. Life expectancy. At 82.2 years, the UK life expectancy is one of the highest globally, suggesting a healthy workforce. As for education, with a mean schooling of 13.4 years and expected schooling of 17.6 years, the UK boasts as one of the most educated populations. This is critical for industries that depend heavily on skilled labor and intellectual capital, such as the finance industry, the technology industry, and advanced manufacturing industry. So given the comprehensive data, Australian firms should consider both economic and human development measures, with emphasis depending on other specific industry requirements. For this presentation, I will be using two industries as an example to elaborate what I mean. For technology and specialized services, firstly, firms in these sectors should prioritize human development metrics. The high level of education and healthy lifespan are indicative of a workforce capable of supporting sophisticated knowledge-intensive operations. As for consumer goods and retail businesses, economic measures, especially PPP, are crucial. The data shows a population of substantial purchasing power, which is fundamental for businesses looking to sell market consumer goods. Thank you. Now I'll be passing the questions to Sam.
So question 3, the cultural distance between Australia and the UK. So to what extent do Australia and the UK differ culturally? Hofstede's cultural dimensions provide a comprehensive framework for understanding cultural differences between nations. So let's explore how these dimensions manifest practically in the UK and Australia. So first up, you have power distance, which is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. So in this case, both Australia and the UK have relatively low power distances, being 38 and 35 respectively, indicating that they both accept a less equal distribution of power. The second factor is individualism or collectivism. So people with high individualistic values tend to care about self-actualization and career progress in an organization, whereas people with low individualistic values tend to value organizational benefits more than their own interests. Again, both nations tend to lean towards individualism in this case. Thirdly, you have sort of masculinity and femininity, also referred to as motivation towards success and achievement. And this refers to sort of a preference for achievement, heroism, and assertiveness, as opposed to cooperation, modesty, and sort of caring for others. And the UK can be seen as slightly more masculine than Australia, although both are relatively masculine in their drives and motives, which indicates that both societies are driven sort of by success and are success-oriented. Also, there's uncertainty avoidance, which refers to the way that a society deals with the fact that the future can never be known. Again, both countries exhibit somewhat moderate to low uncertainty avoidance, but the UK tends to be slightly more tolerant of ambiguity than Australia. And then finally, second to last, you have long and short-term orientation, which is a preference for sort of preserving traditional norms and viewing societal changes skeptically, as opposed to a preference for immediate gratification. In this case, sort of the UK exhibits a slightly stronger long-term orientation, valuing traditional and societal stability, while Australia tends to have a more short-term focus on gratification and adaptability. And then finally, indulgence and restraint, which can be defined as sort of the unrestricted fulfillment of natural human desires, like indulgence, as opposed to the control of desires through strict social norms, restraint. And again, both countries have relatively high levels of indulgence, with Australia leaning slightly higher. But in the end, both countries do value enjoyment and relaxation. Moving on to a second form, you have Ronan and Shenkar's cultural clusters, which offer an alternative approach to understanding cultural similarities, differences among nations. So instead of examining individual dimensions like Hofstede's model, this framework focuses on identifying groups of countries that share common cultural attitudes, behaviors, and values. So despite the geographical differences between the UK and Australia, they both belong to the same cultural cluster. This suggests that despite their differences, there are significant shared cultural traits and attitudes between the two countries. The clustering indicates that Australia and UK are likely to exhibit very similar cultural attitudes, behaviors, and values in many aspects of life, including communication, styles, social norms, work ethic, and approaches to leisure and recreation. So being in the same cultural cluster will facilitate smoother interactions and collaborations between sort of the UK and Australia, and shared cultural understandings and values can help bridge communicational gaps, enhance mutual understanding, and foster cooperation in various domains, including business. So looking at Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, both Australia and the UK have very similar scores for each of those dimensions. And similarly, under the cultural clusters theory, again, Australia and the UK are both close within the same cluster and also share many defining cultural characteristics. And therefore, we can conclude that the UK and Australia share relatively similar cultural dimensions and can be considered quite culturally close. So now to analyze whether the cultures in the two countries are converging or diverging, there is significant evidence to suggest that cultural convergence between the UK and Australia is driven by globalization, technological advancements, and increased sort of interconnectedness. This convergence may increase efficiencies and greater harmony in various domains, such as business, education, and entertainment. However, it may also result in sort of a loss of cultural identity and diversity as distinct cultural traits sort of merge towards universally accepted norms. And the convergence of cultural norms and values between the UK and Australia can lead to increased efficiencies in various aspects of sort of business operations. So shared cultural traits such as preference for individualism, sort of a moderate uncertainty avoidance, and a good balance between masculinity and femininity may facilitate communication, decision-making, and collaboration between employees and stakeholders from both countries. So overall, yes, the UK and Australia are becoming more culturally similar, and by leveraging this convergence of cultural norms, an Australian firm can sort of streamline its process, enhance its competitive advantage, and establish a strong foothold in the UK market.
Thank you, Sam. In this section, we will identify and explain the industries that the UK should specialize in, according to absolute advantage put forward by Adam Smith's influential book, The Wealth of Nations, and comparative advantage, introduced by David Ricardo in his book, The Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. And then to wrap this section up, we'll prescribe the UK with one of these theories to put them in prime position when engaging in international trade. Smith beckons nations like the UK to embrace specialization in industries where they possess an absolute advantage. But what exactly does this entail? An absolute advantage emerges when a nation is more efficient at producing a good than any other. Smith urges nations to specialize and trade in industries they hold an absolute advantage in, or trading for goods which other countries produce most efficiently. With these parameters in place, we find the first industry that the UK shall specialize in is aircraft parts. This is because the UK has cemented itself as the primary contributor to the total value of aircraft parts exported, exporting a total of 10.4 billion US dollars, which represents 17.2% of all exports, beating out many rivals renowned for their aviation industries. Further proving the UK is holders of an absolute advantage in this industry is that the UK enjoy the greatest trade surplus of aircraft parts at 5 billion US dollars, which is 4 times greater than second place, essentially that the UK has a firm buffer in efficiency and productivity, especially in an industry that, as explained by our lecture slides, is hard for late entrants to catch up in. Another industry that the UK should specialize in, according to Smith, is financial services, as although they are second place behind the US in terms of nominal value of exports, the UK are world leaders in net exports of financial services, holding net exports of £63.7 billion, beating the US, who hold a £62.5 billion surplus. Moreover, this gap in net exports and absolute advantage is expected to widen, as the UK's annual growth rate of output per worker in financial services of 3.4% far exceeds the 2.3% seen in the United States. This indicates that the absolute cost of providing financial services in the UK is lower than that of the US, who employ many more in this industry. Meaning that the UK makes better use of their resources, thus satisfying the second condition required for specialization and absolute advantage, according to Mercado. In contrast to Adam Smith, Ricardo argues that a country should only produce goods where it is most efficient within its country, and trade for those goods where it is not efficient. With this framework in mind, the primary industry the UK should specialize in is once again financial services. This is because the financial services industry in the UK is highly efficient, especially compared to other sectors within the UK, as the financial services industry has productivity numbers 2.5 times higher than the economy average, as the sector's output per hour sits at 96.3 pounds. As a result of this great efficiency and productivity, the financial service sector has been crowned as the most productive industry in the UK, thus proving the financial services industry not only holds an absolute advantage, but a strong comparative advantage within the UK too. On top of financial services, the UK can find a solid comparative advantage in mining and quarrying. In fact, the precious metals industry, made up of metals such as gold, silver, and platinum, make up the UK's greatest export by nominal value in 2024, at 78.1 billion US dollars. The reason the precious metals industry holds its position as the top export in the UK is due to the mining and quarrying industry providing the greatest value added per hour in the UK of all exportable industries at £163.2 in value per hour. As a result of the higher levels of efficiency and nominal value added by this industry, according to Ricardo, the UK has a comparative advantage and should choose to specialize in this industry when trading with other nations. Now that we've covered both sides of the coin, which theory, Smith or Ricardo, should the UK abide by? The UK should follow Smith's theory of absolute advantage when engaging in international trade, as it is a much more dynamic and comprehensive theory, which is also interwoven with this theory of development, while Ricardo's is more static in comparison, according to Schumacher, as in theory, for a country to be fit to specialize as afforded by comparative advantage, it must ensure that the same commodity will display absolute advantage to be fit for purpose as an export, which backs up Mercado's proposition that comparative advantage must be accompanied by absolute advantage, as consumers will always seek the lowest price. While in practice, Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage also doesn't stack up, as it is inadequate in explaining what we observe in reality, as the idea that the market mechanism will push towards the balance of trade over time has not occurred, as trade imbalances are currently the norm, as observed by Venengo. In this current day, where technology and innovations are improving at an exponential rate, absolute advantage hedges against such risks better than comparative advantage, as many of the innovations today are more industry-specific than nation-specific. Thus, opting to specialize according to absolute advantage will eliminate these adjustment costs. And now we will pass it on to Ziyu.
Thanks, Joseph. And hello, everyone. My name is Ziyu Wang. In question 5, I will talk about the trade policy tools that UK government currently uses and what international trade theories do those tools support. Before that, I would like to introduce a little background of the UK. The UK left the EU on January 31st, 2020 to become its own economy and trade entity. However, the COVID-19 pandemic leads to disruptions in supply chain and economic downturn due to less spending. And other issues like people losing jobs because of the pandemic, therefore less disposable income, demand curve will shift to the left and lead economic growth decrease. As you can see from the graph, in 2022, there was a big drop. To deal with those challenges, the UK government developed an independent trade policy. Tariffs are one of the tools used to manage foreign obligation according to the UK's trade policy. The EU is the UK's largest trading partner. According to the statistics, 46% of the UK merchandise exports and 53% of UK merchandise imports. In particular, key manufacturing industries such as automotive and aerospace are highly integrated into EU-wide supply chain. After Brexit, the UK introduced the UK Global Tariff, also known as UK-GT, which simplifies and lower tariffs compared to what was previously in place under the EU. The UK Global Tariff applies to all goods imported into the UK unless the country you are importing from has a trade agreement with the UK. This move was strategic to make the non-EU product more competitive in the UK market. Tariffs are often supplied by the mercantilist theory, which argues that countries should export more than they import, and by protecting domestic industries, they can achieve a trade surplus. For example, UK global tariff can help maintain high tariff for certain sensitive industries such as car manufacturing to protect these local industries from the impact of the low-priced product in the international market. Since leaving the EU, the UK has been actively negotiating free trade agreements with countries around the world, including Australia. Those agreements typically reduce tariffs and quotas between member countries. To deal with Australia, it's important test of UK trade policy. These free trade agreements are interesting because even the UK Department for International Trade, known as DIT, shows that the economic benefit from these agreements are extremely limited. The Australian Free Trade Agreement Impact Assignment forecasts UK GDP grows only 0.08%. In the field of trade in goods, UK tariffs on Australia are being liberalized, and the UK has eliminated most tariffs on Australia, including on agriculture products, even on sensitivity products such as beef and lamb. The UK has agreed to reduce and remove tariffs over 15 years. In return, Australians need to import professional and technical services, insurance and pension services from the UK. This trade agreement was based on the comparative advantage theory proposed by David Ricardo. The UK should buy agricultural products from Australia because Australia is better at producing them. Then the UK should sell the high-tech technological products and financial services to Australia because the UK is better at producing those. Content and consumptions on agriculture also reflect the direction of UK trade policy, and the government's focus on the sectors it supports through trading policies such as finance, technology, and digital service. In conclusion, we noticed that UK government were using tariffs and free trade agreements, and those trade instruments are supported by merchandise theory and comparative advantage theory. Thank you very much. And over here, thank you for watching, and we hope that this UK presentation will give you a brief understanding should we consider to international expansion or not. And then there is our reference list for everything. Thank you very much.